Okay, Dad, you were born in Dundee in May 1925. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your childhood?
At Dundee. Well, I was a little boy. I didn't know my mother much, and I didn't see my father much. He was away in the Navy, and my mum was sick in that sanatorium with the disease that all the ladies got in the flax mills. Most of them died about 30-odd. I think she died when I was about 34. So I had then to be shunted out, and then the depression was coming on, or whatever they called it, where everybody was out of work. I was shunted about from one to another, and then eventually I was fostered out to a Mr. and Mrs. White in Lime Kilns, which is not far away near Dunfermline. And wasn't a happy time there. I started school there at 5, and I left there when I was 7 and came down to England. My father was going to take me to a training ship for the Navy boys, orphans. But on the way, he decided that I'd see my grandfather. He'd never met me. My grandfather's a nice man, and he said he's not going on a training ship, my grandson. So I stayed with him. It was a bit hard there with his daughter Eva taking over my guardianship. She was a bit of a hard taskmaster, but she taught me a lot of things as well. But again, I was not allowed to play with other children. So I grew up very quiet and subdued, and couldn't make decisions myself. When I was 14, I left school, which was the age when everybody left, unless you had a grammar school education.
Did you have a nice time at school? How was you at school?
I didn't like school because I was so far behind. And my grandfather was sick, and we lived in a farm cottage, and you had to get out if you couldn't work. So to keep the cottage, I used to go and help him whenever he needed help, like making hedgerows and building stone walls, and it was a general sort of managing job, maintenance job. And we helped cows and calves give birth. In the night, he would wake me up and have this little lantern, and we'd go out and the shed where she's lying down and having a job, and we had to, well, he did it, I watched him do it, and had a rope on our legs to pull them out. So that was sort of an education. I could have learned a lot if I'd have been in mind to want to, but I wasn't interested in farming.
Did you go to school much, or?
Yes, I went to school. I used to have days off. In those days, you had a day off. You had a day off. So if they learned something while you was off, they'd come to the next subject the next day, you didn't know what they're talking about, because nobody would go back and bring you forward.
Who was your favourite teacher?
My favourite teacher was Mrs. Thompson. She was the headmistress. She used to let me sleep in class. She said to Tom and I, said, he was the only pupil we allowed to sleep in class, because we knew he worked so hard, so many hours for a young boy, that he had to have his sleep. He was up in the middle of the night many times, looking after these animals with his grandfather, and going, having a days off, going hedging, like that.
So when you left school, how long did it take you to get home?
What, from school?
Yeah.
To the job?
Yeah, back to where you lived.
Well, I only lived not far from the school. I only lived probably a quarter of a mile from the school. And I used to have to run to get there, because she would never let me get there early. So that's probably why I became a good runner at the time, at that distance. So then when we left school, any job that was going, because the war broke out, I left school in July when the school broke up in 39, and war broke out up in September the 3rd.
When you were at school, you used to run in the running team, did you?
Yes, yeah, it was Eric Jones. He was the fastest 100 metres runner, 100 yards in the young days. And me, Clifford Higgs, he probably was the second fastest. I was the third fastest, and John Tackwell was the fourth. So there was four of us really that were the relay winners, and I did get picked for the counties, and that meant I was picked to run for Northamptonshire against Buckinghamshire and all the other shires, you know. But I pulled the muscle in my leg, the hamstring, rather. It must have been an hamstring. I was out of that, but Auntie Eva didn't want me going to these things because it was days I should be working. And
so when you was at school, but you left school when you were 14, is that right?
yes,
And you went to work on some of the other farms for
I went to work on a chicken farm. Funny, my name's Hensman, and that's the very job I had, because it was the only job that nobody wanted to work for this woman, which I didn't know then. All the young men had got called up or volunteered to go, and the Women's Land Army had started, and of course she would have to obey the rules with them because they came from a camp and had dropped off for the day and they'd had to have the proper times. With me, it didn't matter with her, with me. If dinner was 1 till 2, she'd come to dinner, and if I was finished with sandwiches by 1:15, come on lad, no time to waste, there's work to be done, come on. I was back at work, and then I'd have to go back in the summer late at night to put the chickens away. We had thousands of them, not hundreds, thousands of them, whole fields full of hot chicken points.
You were in charge of, what did you used to have to do to the eggs to send away?
We used to have to look through a special light to see if they were adult, or what they call it, and to see if they got an embryo inside them, or just a yolk. That was a difference in colour. Now I would have to sort them out, and also take blood samples, much like I get took myself these days. Is to spread the wing, stick the needle in, draw the blood out of the wing vein into a little file, and write the number of the chicken on and put the thing around his leg, same number. They send that away to the laboratories. We'd come back and then we'd have to sort out the chickens that were no good for breeding. And then we used to do the eggs, put them in the incubators, and hatch them out, and then send them away in little boxes, special boxes, all the little day-old chicks in, whittling.
And when did you milk the cows? Was that on your farm or on somebody else's farm?
I started on her farm. We had 2, only for their own use, and also she must have done bartering with the others, with, you know how you do. You know, we'll give you milk, you give us a leg of lamb and things like that when you're killing them, because it was illegal in those days in the war. So we did that. I used to milk them early in the morning.
You used to take a little squirt yourself, did you?
Oh, very often. Obviously thirsty, just twist it up and have a shot.
You used to have to fill those big urns, is that right?
That's right. Well, that came later. Her urns weren't big enough for that. That came with another farm. I don't know how I found the courage, because I was very meek and mild, and I never mixed with anybody. I didn't know what we talked about. I didn't know nothing about wirelesses at one point. There was wirelesses in those days, and so I got up courage and I joined up.
But before that, though, you remember when you was on the chicken farm and you heard the noise of another engine that you didn't recognise?
Yeah, well, the farm I was on, where she lived, it must have been about probably 6 miles from the airfield, and we must have been on the end of the runway somewhere, because the aeroplanes used to come. They were very only a couple of 300 feet as I went over the field.
Were these Wellingtons?
No, they were Blenheims and Wellingtons. Blenheims mostly, which were out of date. And I used to wave to the blokes and they waved back because it was not very high. Sometimes I used to see 3 or 4 on a flight go out, or 5, and one was missing coming back. But at that time it was a thrill for me to see these things, and as a young boy I wanted adventure, and that's why I wanted to be one of them. I didn't know the dangers that these fellas were in. To me, it was just a joyride in an aeroplane, you know.
What about the day when you heard that different engine?
Yeah, I was in the field one Sunday morning feeding the chooks. And Northampton had a lot of mist. That's why the Germans never bothered with it. And it only made shoes, leather shoes and stuff, boots. And I knew the sound of engines. Living on the end of that airfield, I could tell an Merlin engine from a Pegasus engine, from a bombers and fighters, and I could hear the engines. I learned that pretty quick. Because it was something I liked doing. It was a hobby of mine. I got nothing else.
And what happened when you heard that different engine?
This one day it was misty, and I heard this. And I thought, that don't sound like one of ours. Sounds like cliche, doesn't it? It doesn't sound like one of our planes. I couldn't see anything because of the mist. But then all of a sudden, I saw the ground erupting in the field at the far end. Oh, gee, big heaps of rock gone up, you know. He had obviously dropped his stick of bombs. He'd probably seen these huts that would look like an army camp. And anyway, he must have thought he'd stir everybody up and they'd all be running. And suddenly he come out of the cloud, only a few hundred feet. And I could see he's coming across firing his guns.
What was it? Was it the twin engine?
Yeah, it would have been a Heinkel, I think it was. But it had a glass front. Heinkel had all of a glass front. And I just ran for the ditch, which was not far away. Again, speedy Gonzales. And then all the leaves were shredding off the hedge. That was all. That was my life now to there, my exciting bit. And then I left. I joined up.
Before that, I would just wonder. Do you remember when the guy with the tank came along?
Yeah, I was in the field one day, and the army camp either wasn't far away either. Northamptonshire Yeomanry, which is a tank regiment. And all of a sudden, they were having manoeuvres, and this tank came through. It looked so gigantic, it's probably a Brengan carrier, I don't know what it was. But it was only small, I dare say, but they weren't big in those days. But it looked huge to me. So did he open the lid at the front. I'd have been a Valentine or something. He opened the lid at the front and popped his head up and he says, "Hello, Den." Oh, I said, "Hello." He said, "You got my old job, mate." He said, "You don't want to stuck with her long. You want to get out of there as quick as you can. Work you to death." He said, "Go and join up and get in a tank like this. These are the things. You want to go to war in one of these, you're safe in one of these. Nobody can shoot you in these." Good advice. I get burnt to death. So I tucked up, carried on a Saturday to finish work at 12. Used to have to go back later. On Saturday, worked 6 days and 6.5 days sometimes. And I went down to the recruit and I was on my bike. It was only 5 miles away. The joint one. And I went in and saw Sergeant and he said, "Oh yeah, what do you want to do?" "Oh, you want to join up, son?" "Righto." He said, "How old are you?" I said, "I'm 16. Oh, he said, "I can't take you 16 because you told me you're 16. You told me you're 16. You should have told me something else." Well, I didn't know the ropes then, did I? Anyway, he said, "You go down the passageway, the Navy down there, the Navy take them at 15. He said, "Get out of there as soon as you can, because when you reach 18, the Ministry of Labour, I think they called them then, won't let you go. Reserved occupation." So that's how I went down the passageway. I met this Royal Marine. I didn't know what Royal Marines were. No idea. He said, "All right, can I help you?" I said, "I'm looking for the Navy, sir." "Oh, come in there." He said, "We're part of the Navy." "Oh, all right." I said, "Oh, you're good." So he said, "Oh, look," he said, "we can't take you till you're 17. But we'll take all your particulars, have you checked out, and when you're 17, we'll send you some call-up papers. You to come. Voluntary.